So I'm going to hand you over to Ben Carpenter and welcome to.
Thank you. Sam and I are going to talk for about 15 minutes each about our own perspectives on art, technology, the next 10 years, and authenticity. And then we'll probably have some questions for each other, and we would be pleased to take questions from you as well. But today's session is about how artists can navigate a post-Brexit, post-COVID world and prosper. I'm an artist, graduated in 1999 from the Royal College of Art, MA in sculpture, worked in higher education for quite a long time. Just a couple of months ago I left my position at Nottingham Trent University to work with emergent tech enterprises who are operating between art and technology. So that's my background, and quite a lot of what I'm going to be saying is informed by my experience of being a practicing artist, my experience of working with these technology companies, and also my experience of having spent the best part of 25 years working in higher education, trying to pass on the skills that I think young, largely young, but emergent artists need. Regardless of your thoughts about Brexit, one of the dominant narratives of that campaign was to take back control. This was a message of sovereignty and autonomy, and ultimately one of separation. And then a few years later, we all had separation imposed on us by the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think that that experience demonstrated actually how much we need each other and how problematic separation might be. But barely as we are emerging from these twin crises, we are in the early days of another one. A splintering of the world order that has become increasingly violent in Israel, in Gaza and in Ukraine. And against this atomizing and destructive backdrop, we are in the throes of an accelerating technological revolution. Sometimes referred to as the Metaverse, sometimes referred to as Web 3. It's got three aspects which overlap: immersive experience, artificial intelligence, and blockchain. I want to spend a little bit of time explaining what these three things are, not so much as technologies as cultural phenomena. Dealing with immersive experiences first, because that's the one I know least about, and it's the one I'm least interested in, which might sound a bit weird standing here in an arts centre saying but I mean in a technological sense. This is the use of technology either to augment or extend the user's awareness of their environment, or to replace it altogether, so you can enter a virtual world for the purposes of having a meeting with somebody, teleconferencing, or shooting up aliens, depending on what you're into. Turning now to artificial intelligence, that's got a very long history. We think of it as being a very new phenomenon, a very recent thing that's suddenly emerged into our social media feeds, but actually it goes back a very long way. It's got its roots in the 1950s. In the 1970s, Harold Cohen's Aaron project was creating autonomous images, both figurative and abstract, and also drawing and painting them using robotic apparatus. But in recent years, that's really changed. It's accelerated. It's become incredibly powerful. And we think now of the most visible form of AI, which is generative AI, which you can see all over the place. But actually, that's just the tip of the iceberg. If you're writing something in Microsoft Word, quite likely if you're a university student, you might have a Grammarly subscription provided for free by your institution. That's AI. If you're using predictive text on your phone, that's AI. If you buy something on Amazon, if you listen to music, if you stream it, an AI is curating your experience. Most of us in the room will use generative AI. All of us in the room will experience AI in some aspect of our lives. You can't escape it. Blockchain technology is one of the three that probably takes the most plainly. So I'm going to try and do it very, very simply, and this is a description which is coming not from a computer scientist, but from an artist. So if you ask me to open the box and explain how it actually works, I'm not going to be able to do that. But blockchain is the technology which underlies cryptocurrency and other tokenized assets like NFTs. In its simplest form, a blockchain is a shared, permanent, append-only ledger that is stored across multiple locations simultaneously. So you can think of it as being like having access to a copy of a ledger that automatically updates itself across everybody else's copies, and everyone can see all of the transactions, and everyone who's got a copy of that ledger is responsible collectively for maintaining its veracity. Unlike other forms of record keeping, there is no central authority, and instead, through means that need not concern us today, every participant has equal access to the record. This record is used to record the ownership of assets like cryptocurrency or artwork, although it could equally well be high-end fashion or it could be real estate. And ownership can be transferred without recourse to a central authority like a bank or estate agents. So blockchain culture's got two contradictory sides to it, because what this technology facilitates is a kind of permissionless Wild West of neo-capitalism. So on this one side, you've got the tech bros, the speculative tech bros, whose battle cry is "Go West, enter the wild frontier of this new form of capitalism." But on the other side, there is a community who are using blockchain to develop robust, cooperative governance structures to cooperate across international boundaries, often organised into what are called DAOs. Now, DAO is a kind of technologically enabled co-op, where every member has a very transparent stake in what's developed. Same technology, completely different vision, completely different culture. I started off talking about a fractured world, which seems more like the early decades, to my mind, of the 20th century than the future. And the technologies that I'm talking about now, against this rather minatory backdrop, are morally neutral. They could either be good, they could ameliorate the situation which we're in, or they could exacerbate the situation which we're in. And I think we are in a very perilous position. And there are implications for artists that I want to share with you today. All of this is caveated by the fact that I am not a futurologist, and I wouldn't describe myself as an expert. What I'm passing on to you is what I've learned from my own experiences of working in higher education, working as an artist, and now working with the technology companies that I cooperate with. But expertise in this area, as I've learned, is actually a strange thing, because it's moving so quickly, I don't think anybody really knows what's going on. You can listen to authorities talking about blockchain technology and receive very contradictory views. So all we can do is speculate on the basis of a snapshot. And so I'm going to speculate, and you can decide whether to listen to me or not. Leaving immersive experiences to one side, I want to look at AI and blockchain. Generative AI is incredibly powerful. If you are a photographer and your livelihood is dependent on taking stock photographs, I think it's time to retrain. Shutterstock, which is a very large provider of stock photography that's used in all sorts of contexts, you've seen it on menus and adverts, etc., already offer AI images to its clients. And in fact, that's like the landing page now. That's what they get offered first. And Adobe has embedded Firefly into Photoshop Beta. I can't see how a human can compete with that. I don't see how a human can compete with the demand for images of pizza, or cups of coffee, or nice scenes that go in the background. And increasingly, this technology will challenge all forms of relatively low-level creativity. In still or moving image, copywriting, music creation, all of these areas, any creative output that is not framed as a cultural experience, or that does not get interrogated in the same way as art does. In the political sphere, the uses to which AI can put are more sinister. It is a boon to propagandists everywhere. But this is where blockchain and other forms of cryptographic technology can come to the rescue. I was speaking at an event a couple of months ago And one of the presenters was doing some research into fake news, the use of AI to create propaganda in news. And she'd been looking at how organisations like BBC, RTE, Al Jazeera are already using what's called a cryptographic hash, which is a special kind of piece of very complicated mathematics that can impose a digital fingerprint on a news story or a PDF that can then be compared by members of the general public to see if that really is from that news organisation or if it's been made up. And the same technology can be used for any kind of digital file already. This is technology which is here now, so JPEGs, MP4s, PDFs, the stuff that you as emergent artists have as part of the digital workflow. And in the sphere of art, the same technology, in conjunction with blockchain, underpins services like those provided by one of the companies I'm working with called Imprimo to provide empirical evidence that an image existed at a given moment in time and that its authenticity has been claimed by a human artist who has also proven that they are who they claim to be. This takes me on to one of the reasons why I think AI is not actually an existential threat to artists. And that's because people are interested in other people. The service that is being provided by Imprimo and others operating in that space is one which validates an act of human creation and tethers it to a human. And that can be used to build provenance, which is incredibly valuable if you're talking about artwork which is made, blue chip art, and how that circulates through auction houses and galleries. But it's something you need to engage with when you're actually unsuccessful. So you need to lay that foundation in the early stages of your career so that you can capitalize on that later on. It won't be until later that you realize that the work you're making now is actually valuable, both now and in the future. Not just culturally, but also financially. And as artists, you are going to want to be able to realize some of the financial value of your work. But for me, it's also very much about the story that you tell and the kind of authentic storytelling which is going to become increasingly important in our culture. I talked about how photographers are having their lunches eaten by generative AI for purposes of stock imagery. Well, that new economy of images which are untethered to any event that happened in the world, any kind of empirical event that happened in the world, a real event, are nowhere near as valuable as an image of something that happened, something that was witnessed. And that is going to be what photographers increasingly do and talk about through their image making. So what I think you all need, the challenge that you all need to think about is how you really magnify your individuality and how you talk with direct authenticity to an audience through new platforms. I think there are a few lessons here that I want to conclude with, because I'm probably coming to time. A few lessons that I want to conclude with. So one of them is that artists go onto Instagram and they use Instagram as the way of connecting with an audience. We think about authenticity as something you can perform over social media. There are hazards with that, because if you were to read the terms and conditions, you'll see that you're actually handing over your intellectual property to those big social networks. So I think you need to, my advice to you would be to engage with this technology and see where the technology can help you invest in your future storytelling, rather than take something that's particular or individual or special about you now and then co-opt it to their own ends. I'm very struck, I'm going to end with this I think, I'm very struck by the fact that artists are taught in my context is very much visual art, in higher education, when they're writing about themselves, to use the third person, to create the impression somehow that you've got staff. I suppose that's what it's doing. People that could, or a gallerist that can produce that copy for you. I think that is really bad advice. Because the authenticity that really matters now, and it will matter more in the future, It's how you can enable your audience to connect directly with you. And in order to do that, I think you should use the first person voice, I. And the more you can demonstrate that you really are who you say you are, and that you are a unique person with a subjective experience, the more valuable, both commercially and culturally, your work will become. Thank you. I'm going to hand over to
So next up we've got Mr. Sam Tansabi.
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, do you want
great.
the microphone on? I mean, it's 45. I'd say that, although I don't know how to turn it on.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at. I can't tell how to turn it on, but it's going to be okay. Alright, so following off of the I, we've got AI here. I guess I'm taking a slightly different view to what you may be taught at university, but I think it's important to first consider what does AI make, or so if you can see there, that's an AI image. So we can ponder this slightly. So who wants to describe what this is? Anyone? Just describe it. What do you think this is?
I would say it's a robotic face.
Robotic face. Okay. And what is this?
What is it?
How would you describe it? Don't be afraid of like the right answer, the wrong answer. Just
House in a snow globe, but it's made of seaside.
okay. And this one should definitely give it away. I'm hoping anyway.
Batman.
No, this is an image. And that's what I want to address in terms of the AI versus the artist, is that artists make art. AI makes images, and there is a difference. Speaking with people in the tech industry, it's very clear that they cannot differentiate between an image and a piece of art. And this is another image, although it looks incredibly realistic, it is just an image. So I think I'd like to try and play a game with everyone of who made me. Let's see how this goes. I'm a little bit nervous. I just made this presentation about half an hour ago, so we'll see how this goes. All right, so this image. Oh, damn it! Okay, and this image. And this image.
My nightmares?
You think it's AI? All right, you're right.
Oh.
And this image? Artist, as someone said. Yeah? So I guess my question is, why does this sell for around 80,000 and this is worthless? Time. What do you mean by time?
It's in AI can generate art in matters of seconds, whereas an artist that's created art, they put probably a lot of time into it. So even if you're not going to value the end things and stuff, then you've got to pay someone for the amount of time that they put into it.
But what about Andy Warhol's piss paintings? Literally just put substance on the canvas, pissed over them, and then you wait for them to dry, bang. I mean, he was selling those for like 100k.
That's still something, isn't it? Because AI art is completely worthless. Andy Warhol's piss is probably worth
Status. Yeah.
I think I'd almost say, I don't know if it is, like, I think increasingly, as, sorry, I've got my name.
Ben.
Ben, yeah, I think as Ben was saying, I think it's not even necessarily the time or effort, it's the, as you said, the story and the person and that kind of context of the image. So I think Andy Warhol would probably be making AI images now, actually. I think he likes it quick, you know, like, quick, lazy, you know.
Yeah.
If you like that, I think people would still probably pay a lot if it was, you know what I mean, the person. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess that goes on to this slide, which is what is an artist? It's actually a person who creates paintings or drawings as a profession or as a hobby. And that's what you are, and that's what people buy. They buy a part of you when they buy your work, and they invest in you as an artist. So I just want to go through a few more examples. So who knows whose work this is? And this? And this? So it is Sarah Lucas. So then brings the question, how do you all know what Sarah Lucas is?
First time I ever saw the work of Sarah Lucas, I think it was about 15 years old, and it was in a newspaper, because it was the one with the mattress,
Yeah.
the cucumbers, and it was a very famous picture of her with fried eggs on the chest,
Yeah.
and it was all like shock and horror. That's my first encounter with the work of Sarah Lucas, was this newspaper going, what's this?
So, but why do you know Sarah Lucas? Other than that image, why do people know Sarah Lucas?
Because of the young British artist.
I don't know Sarah Lucas, but I can tell when an artist is an artist because it's a language.
It's a language, yeah.
A pattern.
Yeah.
But I would also add that I know Sarah Lucas because there was because of the hype, the sensation, the young British artist, the time that was happening. So, there was an ability to ride a wave. So my consciousness of her was part of a bigger knowledge of what was happening in the art sector, with other names as well. So there was almost marketing is why I know Sarah Lucas as much as anything.
Yeah. Anybody else? Yep.
An artist has an identity, whereas AI doesn't. It's just like invisible almost. But like as an artist, you have what makes you you and
Exactly.
identifiable.
Yeah. Cool. So Sarah Lucas, I was just going to say, Sarah Lucas's identity, I guess, is very tangible in its visual elements. It's very consistent. I think since the early 90s up until now, that's like almost a good 20 years. She's almost had the exact same visual aesthetic throughout. She's managed to reinvent that in different ways over time. So has anybody done this work? No? Or this work? Ai Weiwei, yeah. And this, this is Ai Weiwei. So I would argue that people know Ai Weiwei because he's created, like Sarah Lucas, a consistent body of work, but for him, it's around particular themes. So visually, I mean, there's a fair bit of a difference between this and this. So this is kind of like iconoclastic, looking at China's history. This is kind of looking at China's history plus capitalism, and this, I don't know what to make of this one, but it certainly is different in regards to Sarah Lucas in that he focuses on themes that he has throughout his practice. And then lastly, we have this work, which I'm sure everyone will probably know. And we have this work, and this work. So Damien Hirst has spent 20 years, at least the first 20 years of his career was just making work about life and death for 20 years. That one idea just rinsed and repeated. And, I mean, it's quite miraculous to consider just how many works he made in 20 years and how many of them are about the same subject matter. So as emerging artists, the key focus should be on building a brand in terms of being authentic. And it may take a while to ponder or discover what you're always talking about. There's usually one underlying principle that every artist is sort of going on about, but then it's covered up or masked with a new veneer. So as you go into this brave new world with AI technology and a plethora of different platforms to promote yourself on, I would suggest just focusing on what is a brand and just considering that. So a brand is just a name, term, design, symbol, or any other feature that distinguishes one seller's goods or service from those of other sellers. And that's pretty much it. I just think, if you're studying, look at the commercial art world and how they operate. They want to buy brands. Collectors buy brands. And as an artist, that is what you are. You may not agree with the sort of capitalist principles, and you may not like the gallery system, but I think you will have better luck trying to sell yourself than trying to beg for a grant. That's my view. Okay. Sorry, that's pretty much it.
Yeah. You picked Damien Hirst because he's quite famous for kind of farming out. He's human. Make a lot. So he doesn't make his own.
Yeah.
So it's almost like he's done that. Where he's got this brand and this idea, and somebody else, just kind of gives it to a group of young people who want to get a leg and foot up in the art world. So that's it is like a human form of But again, it's his brand, isn't it? That's the key thing. Even if he's not producing work. So.
And it gets to the stage where you're at the scale where you can't actually produce everything.
Yeah, that's true.
Like the big sculpture of the cartoon doll of insides, like there was no way this kid from Leeds is going to spend 2 years making this sculpture. You're going to commission someone to do it. But yeah, I think there's a documentary about the sensationalists, which I would suggest that everyone watch. If you can, it's BBC iPlayer, it's free. But you will see how people played the game and won at the game. And it is a game.
It's a really good documentary.
It's really good.
It is really good.
Well, there's the good and bad boys and girls of
Yes.
British.
Yeah.
They might be the title of it. Are there any questions for Sam and Ben? Is there any sort of thoughts, feelings that anybody's having about what they've heard? Yes.
I don't know how to say it, but I don't agree with you.
Okay.
Both of them, or just one, or?
A bit of both.
What do you agree with? That's good.
Yeah, let's hear it.
I don't agree that AI can't make you an artist. I don't agree that a brand would help, but why do you have to sell yourself? You could put a symbol on AI working it, you're still the artist of that work. AI, you could put in categories and it could come up with something that you love and it could come up with something you hate and you just keep going. So technically you're still working, you're still commissioning, you're still adding till it looks what you want it to look like, and then you can go and sell it. And people will probably still buy it, even if you don't have a brand.
But because there is a human that is producing it, that is making the work look consistent over time, so they are building a brand. Whether you like it or not, whether you're using AI technology, you're using humans in China to do all your drawings, you're still building a brand, right? And they're not buying the images, they're actually buying parts of you. That's what they want to buy.
So I completely agree with that. I want to take your challenge a little bit further. So one of the other companies I advise creates generative AI, as well as creates AIs that curate experience for consumers. And I use AI. It's nothing wrong with having that as part of your creative workflow. I hope that you didn't think I was arguing against AI or saying that images which are created in that way have no value. I use it all the time. Every time you text someone, if the word pops up and you accept the suggestion, you're using AI, but you're having a conversation. And as Sam's saying, in that example, what you were talking about, so how value is created by the human around the image. That's just a material, it's a medium. But there are a few, to leave AI to one side just for a moment, thinking about collective authorship. The art world as a whole works in that way. So there are some quite contradictory ideas here. The first is that the artist's business is to create using language Sam uses, which isn't bad language, lots of people use this, which is the brand. It's a very easy way of thinking about it. If you create a brand, you're creating a sense that through the artifact, your audience is in a connection with the person. There's something of a kind of performance about that, because in fact, there are other actors involved. And the whole art world, everybody in the art world, the curator, the gallerist, the journalist, the academic, adds meaning and value to the artwork which is created. And then that culture, that kind of capital, that cultural capital comes back on the brand of the artist. And that might sound inauthentic if you're going to be using the language which I use quite a lot. But, you know, I think culture is a space where we can play with these sorts of ambiguities. And something that struck me as I was thinking about what I was going to say today on the way up, and it was that, and I've thought about this a fair bit recently, that in the same way as the advice at art schools, it seems to still be you should write about yourself in the third person to create the impression that you've got this authority that you don't yet have. We probably still have curricula which teach a lot of post-structural philosophy. You might still have the death of the author on your reading lists. You might still have to engage with Barthes and Foucault. We think about how this stuff's not real. Right? And now we've got AI comes along that can do really competently a lot of mediocre creativity. And I think this challenge has made us go, you know, this stuff about the author being dead, but I'd quite like to keep that bit, actually. I think that now, whether you think it's true or real or whatever, there is a value to something called authorship that I think is that's just something for you to think about. I wouldn't treat it cheaply as young creatives or as emerging creatives. I think it's something that you need to foster. And I think, you know, what Sam's advice to Sam to think about it as a brand is perfectly good, because in some ways that kind of encapsulates some of those tensions and contradictions.
Yeah. We live in a consumerist society, right? So, you know, the artist has to be the entrepreneur and capitalist, because everyone is looking to exploit you throughout your career. You're going to make the least amount of money in your career out of everyone that's involved in the art game. Just ponder that. You're going to spend, what, maybe 10 hours, 8 hours a day, and if you're like me, maybe even longer, just making work, and then you're going to make the least amount of money out of it from everyone in the game. So, you know, you have to think the way they think, I guess.
We have a question from the lady on the back there.
Well, our question is kind of continuing on what's being talked about. Is it possible that AI is a modern tool of creating art? I mean, when Impressionism was Impressionism, everybody thought it was like, no, that's not art.
Yeah.
But once you pass it, we're not there yet, then you recognize it is art. AI right now is imitating what we humans create as art, because even it can create poetry.
Yeah.
And I thought, poetry, you know, if you like poetry, then you understand the essence of what good poetry, or whatever means to you good poetry, is about. So AI is starting to capture ideas from us, and it's a new tool. It could be a new tool for new artists to express. It's just another way. It's not
it's another medium.
Or musicians who play an instrument, or painters who actually use a brush. You know, it's just another tool, maybe.
Yep. Ben, do you want to say something before I?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think that it could just be a way of making something. What I'd say is that let's imagine someone painting. Oil paint, linseed, smell the linseed on stretched burlap canvas. Lovely. It's real, it's an object, it's physical. It's not really art then until it's part of a body of work and it's connected with the biography of the individual. Because that's what people are buying. That's what artists are making. They're making objects which are like moments in an ongoing narrative, which talks about some individual's time-bound experience, very subjective, of the world which they're in. But the only reason why you can go into a gallery and you can say this is, you know, Hervin Andersen's very famous, well-known British painter. This is a Hervin Andersen, you might say, of the painting. There's that connection, even in the casual language which we use, between the artist and the object. If you have an encounter with someone for the first time, you don't really know them until you've met them a few times. You find a rounded picture. You might infer a personality on the basis of a very short encounter, because, you know, that's what we're very good at. We're very good at making inferences. But it's extremely difficult to infer that kind of biography or that kind of connection with a body of work from an image which is being taken out of its context, which is what AI does. It produces images with no context.
Can I just add something onto that very quickly?
It's
Is that if you imagine,
at the back,
Yeah.
okay?
if we imagine a world where everyone is using this tool, but everybody's actually being honest and they're saying AI poet, and then their name, right? My name is James McDougall, I'm an AI poet. So they acknowledge that they're using AI in all of their poetry. And let's just imagine everyone's like, yeah, you can make loads of money out of this. And it proliferates. I think what will then happen is that the value of those artists who are actually, everything is authentically human made, like it's a human coming from a human speaking to another human, the value of those will just skyrocket because people want that authentic connection with another human being and another artist. But you have questions?
Yes, Sophie.
So with the discussion with AI and at the moment, I feel like the sense of accomplishment that we feel as creative people is the fact that we've learned how to do the thing that we've created. So like, for example, at the moment I've gone back into songwriting, and it would be very easy for me to hop on ChatGPT or one of these AI music creators and just say I want this set of chords in this key to follow this progression, and the AI could do it. But I've not learned how to songwrite by pressing a button, and with the songs I have written, part of the sense of like, wow, I can't believe I've done that, is because I've had to teach myself music theory, and I've had to teach myself how to do that. And one of the really good things about being a creative and like exploring new things or getting back into things is that sense, like the joy of learning. And you don't get the joy of learning, and you don't get the ability to grow if you're relying on AI.
Yeah.
Interesting. There's going to be John at the back, and then Georgia. Do you want to answer Sophie's point? And then Harrison, we'll get to you. I'm clocking them up.
I would just agree. There is a certain amount of value and self-fulfillment you get from having to learn a skill, and other humans recognise that. That's the point. I think that's when people see AI images, they're like, oh my god, that's mind-blowing, like a computer program just made this image. And then you just scroll to the next one. You're like, oh my god. And yeah, it just repeats itself. It's just a copy of a copy of a copy. Like there isn't anything authentic which you find from another human. But
yes. So similar to what Sophie just said.
Yeah.
We've just been saying this morning about the value of what we all put into our work. Whereas AI has no emotion to that whatsoever. Creating an image, there's no emotion. Whereas as humans we put our heart and soul into it. And I think that's the difference. Do you think that with us being humans, an AI can just create artwork? Do you think we
images
are a bit threatened by that?
Would be how quickly they can make.
Can just do it like that. We're a bit like, whoa.
Yeah, there's probably a natural bit of defensiveness towards anything that can do what you can do, but better. But it's not actually doing what you can do. It's producing a copy of a copy of a copy, assimilated and amalgamated into one thing, which looks kind of like a piece of artwork, but really is just an image. I do believe there is a distinction between those two things. But yeah,
I think there is a degree of affront from this technology. If you can spend time acquiring skills of songwriting, and then a machine can come along and write a song. Does that cheapen your labour? I think it does if you misconstrue what you're labouring for. If you think that you're labouring for creating a discrete object, sure. But you're not, and you shouldn't look at it like that. As an artist, you're making a body of work over the duration of your life. And that's something that relies on the possession of a kind of organically based subjective experience, which is your unique advantage as a human. I think the affront is also perhaps exacerbated by some of the ways in which artists' work is being used without recompense to train these LLMs, large language models. And that's something that is, well, it's working its way through the courts at the moment.
Well, just like, sorry, like 20, 30 years ago when the internet came out, everybody was like, well, what's this all about? And it's only until technologies progress, social media's come on, we're using that as a tool. And is AI just like Gabrielle was saying, is this just another tool to use?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you feel no fear for it then?
Well, you shouldn't really.
I'm mixed.
You're mixed,
to
yeah.
be honest.
Georgia, and then Harrison, and then the lady at the front.
I think I've got kind of mixed feelings about all the stuff that's been said. I kind of disagree with the very sort of capitalist stance that you folks seem to have. A lot of the stuff about like the brand and the body of work and stuff like that is a very sellable thing. And when you can create art just for you, and it can have a value just for you, and it doesn't have to have this market value. And I think AI plays a really big role in that as well. Like I've got friends who are physically disabled and cannot make the art that they want to make, but they're learning how to use AI and learning the language to use to make it, create the artwork that they want to. This isn't artwork that's being sold, it's art that they're just sharing with friends and having fun with it. And ultimately, for some people, that's the point of art. It's not this very sellable thing. Also, the idea of like an image versus artwork. Again, going back to like the Damien Hirst idea of like, you know, the human AI that he kind of had. Like, what's the difference between that? Like the next picture of the polka dots that he did. What's the difference between him getting a bunch of people to make that and him, you know, typing into some software saying like colourful polka dots? Like what then makes that one just an image versus that? Sorry, yeah, makes one an
Because
image.
he has a brand. He invested 20 years into doing all the legwork.
Yeah, I know, but that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's still his brand if he's using AI, so what makes the AI generated one an image, not an artwork? Because you're saying that.
Because we can differentiate that. You know that that's from Damien Hirst, right? You may have feelings towards Damien
But the
Hirst,
other
but
one
when you
is by Damien Hirst as well.
yeah, but regardless of whether or not he's made it, we know that we're buying him, right? We know it comes from him.
That's
It's
what I'm
from
saying.
his
So they're
idea.
both artworks. One's not an image and one's an artwork. They're both artworks.
I don't think the AI one is an art. Like if
But it's
AI,
his brand.
yeah.
It's still a Damien Hirst. So I guess that's where.
Yeah, but I think you're kind of confusing or conflating what an artwork and an image is. An image is just something you just see, you're like, okay, great, yeah, and you move on. An artwork is made by a human and it's a body of work generally. And there is a brand attached to that artwork. Damien Hirst, you know, everyone will have different feelings towards him, but he did a lot of legwork to make sure that when he either uses human AI or he uses actual AI as he has done in more recent works, that people buy it because they know him, there is a market value, and as I said before.
That was the point that I was making, because throughout you kind of made a differentiation between AI generated stuff that's an image and artist made stuff as artwork. But if an artist is using AI, is it not still artwork? But which you're now saying it is, and that's I guess where I'm getting confused because that language has changed throughout.
Because there is pardon me then, there is the issue with the fact that if an artist is using an AI, that's fine, but there is a human involved. I'm not saying that every piece of AI imagery is going to be worthless, but you're going to have to build a brand, is what my main conclusion was at the end, is that you have to you have to build a brand somewhere. And people don't generally buy a brand, which is like, well actually they do. Some people buy a brand. That's the only challenge really to everyone is if artists or creatives think, I'm going to make an entire brand based off of AI, and I'm going to do the kind of, what's his name, the graffiti artist Banksy style and be completely anonymous. And you do have a challenge, right? But eventually some people are going to want to try and interview him, and if there's no one to interview...
But that's fine, the art still exists without an interview. Like that isn't, like we were talking about success earlier, like you don't have to,
but
the
there
art
is
still exists without that sort of marker of success of like having been
But the art world generally needs.
Fuck the art world. Like, you don't need that. I'm talking about just making art. Like,
You can just
don't
make
have
art. But even as artists, I think there is a difference between somebody who making art for themselves and somebody who wants to make a profession out of it.
They're all artists.
Okay.
There are four other and this is
Yeah.
super fascinating, and I think we might pick this up at the end as well. But I can see hands popping up all around, probably in reaction to
One
this.
thing I want to comment on in relation to that question, which is, I don't think what we're talking about is capitalism. Capitalism is exploiting other people's labour. And I think artists should be able to profit from their own labour. I think if you're reliant on grant funding, you're putting yourself alone, you're putting yourself in a precarious position. I've taken my own grant funding in the past. I've also sold work in commercial galleries. They're both perfectly valid ways of existing. And I would like art schools to be better at preparing graduates to be able to work within the commercial sector, because I think it puts graduates as they leave in a stronger position to be able to make choices about how they sustain their practice.
Thank you, Ben. So Harrison, the lady at the front, Gaynor, and the lady in the green jumper, and that will be the end of the questions for this session. But I don't want you to not think about or talk about it, but a bit afterwards. And Vicky wants to ask a question. Are you going to pull some kind of weird rank on me now?
No, I was just having
as a UKNA employee. And then we'll end with Vicky.
Thanks.
There you go. All right, so, Harrison.
I fully support the ideological point of view which you're putting forward, but you've both spoken about this idea of people wanting to buy into authenticity, but is there any evidence, any actual truth that people want to buy into authenticity? We're moving through an era of post-truth where we see with algorithms and sort of people's attention span, people are sort of gravitating more away from having an actual engagement with things to a more superficial understanding of the world, and they're okay with that. People accept things which aren't necessarily true because it gives them the answer that they want to receive. So we're saying that people want to buy into humanity, into a blood and guts business, as Nick Cave put it. But is that actually true? Do people want to put the effort in to do that? We know that AI will continue to develop. It could create a body of work based on any sort of parameters that you wish to suggest. So are both of you suggesting that people are going to somehow change and the movement of humanity is going to alter so that people suddenly are much more engaged and say, no, fuck this computer stuff, I want the human stuff, I want the blood and guts thing, because that seems like a very unlikely prospect.
Good question. I've got a few thoughts in relation to that. So, first of all, it's a great question. The art world's got an industry which is built on what in any other field would be called fact-checking, which is about provenance. So this is a whole industry based around authenticating artworks. That's got real value in it. So it's got hundreds of years of practice behind it, and that is how the art market as it is currently constituted functions. So I think in relation to the first point you've made, yes, authenticity is the dominant model at the moment. So it's where the money is at the moment. Authenticity isn't necessarily exactly the same thing as the truth. I think it's a slippery concept. It might be something that feels like the truth. And in public discourse, you've got, you're right, people's willingness to buy into something regardless of whether it reflects the facts as they appear to be. Post-truth political discourse, which is based on charisma, which is a form of dark authenticity, which we're seeing more and more of in our political discourse. And that's why in response, news agencies, news organisations developed big fact-checking departments who do nothing other than listen to what these people say and then lay out the facts for people to make their own mind. Whether that's going to be something they are successful in maintaining or not is, well, let's hope so, because the alternative is not very good. That's what I would say in response to your question. I think the challenge to authenticity in the art world is, well, no one wants to buy a fake. By the time work's worth something, then all the experts will come out. I'm more worried about what authenticity means now, political discourse.
Can I just have a couple of thoughts as well?
We might have to part this up. This is just an amazing discussion. But time is definitely not on our side, I'm so sorry to say. And I really want to pick this up later in the day.
Yep.
So the lady at the front, I feel like I've got more questions on.
I'm going to try to be very quick.
Okay,
So
thank you.
I think a lot about the ethical and productive use of AI as an artist and a researcher. So I just wanted to draw attention to the fact that we all know that all artists, it's not about being professional or doing arts as a hobby, but we don't have similar, like equal access to resources. And if you look at the past, like you see lots of great musicians, artists, a lot of people work with teams, with assistants, and you can actually look, when I see the brand, like actually the brand of an artist, when you think of conceptual art, it's the way you're thinking, like it's how your brain works, right? And I think working with the AI has this advantage of having a kind of team of assistants and interns that could produce like samples for you, because not all of us have the luxury to work with like how to say that, like access resources and like try and fail and see and like so I think the AI is not actually producing that. Like, let's give ourselves a bit more credit as human beings. Like, it's like in terms of authenticity, you have the design, and this gives us the AI gives us the luxury to come to that point, and it's almost monitoring your thinking process, designing process. I would say it's a new technology, but it's not totally new to use that kind of tool that not creates the idea, but creates the actual work for you. That's what I want to say. Like, so let's not.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
Do you want to quick response? No,
I don't think I've got a response, but I think I'm concerned over time. I just kind of wanted to say that, if we imagine a world where, like, which you described, how are people going to buy into that AI producing these fake images? Okay, yeah, sorry. Okay,
I can see a response line, everybody like quick hands up. Put a pin in that because I really want to carry this on, but I want to give Gaynor an opportunity for your question.
It's actually not a question, it's just more of a comment.
Okay, cool.
It's reminding me why you do this work, why you're an artist.
Yeah.
When you've worked in the industry similar to what we're constantly saying, I definitely agree on the brand, we're working in the commercial industry, and then also working with art. There is that thing, so I think everyone in the industry is asked to remember why you're doing it. And you are wanting to be the main face of some brand conversation into it. You're talking about capitalism, it's not part of it, but it's still part of that as well. So I think it goes back to what we were discussing about success and value. I think continuously going with that, everything else is about putting your own sort of perspective of where it puts you. It's just you being honest, authentic, and being true to yourself. That's what people find art. Because I've worked with some artists where you go into a show and you look at it, it's like, the work's not just real, but it's selling. And then the unknown artists who are like, wow, this is new, but they never get to get that name. So again, that's narrative that they're creating. They're really clever with it. So you have to really think about where do you stand, what is your story, what is your narrative.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And it was the lady in the green jumper and then Vicky.
Coming back around to the Metaverse conversation, I just wondered if you could have any thoughts on the value of these AI spin paintings.
I didn't quite catch the last.
The value of his AI spin paintings, right? So he did use AI. I will say what Damien Hirst's own friend said to him many years ago in the early 90s, which is, you started your career in reverse. You punched out your best works at the beginning of your career, and they've just progressively got worse. That was his best mate that said that to him. And I kind of agree.
Is that possibility? So
Pardon?
you don't have to work quite as hard.
Or maybe once you've been doing the same thing over and over again, it's quite hard to kind of keep reinventing the wheel and trying to find inspiration. Like, it could be just the fact that he wants to make money from it, but hey, everyone wants to make a living.
Thank you. Last question, Vicky.
Thanks. So, as someone that works with young artists, and I mean 12, 13, I have a lot of conversations with them and a lot of school teachers who talk about how those students are, at that age, you're not at the point that you guys are at, you're not at university level, you're not at kind of graduate level where you're considering your work in what does authenticity mean, what work am I creating, what's my practice, what am I exploring. At 13 you're looking at, can I draw better than you?
Yeah.
And they are looking at AI and going, well I can't, so I'll use this. And so schools are already starting to accept that that's happening and having to build that into their kind of grading processes and their teaching processes of going, I acknowledge you're going to use it anyway, so we're going to have to explore how we can do that best. And I just wondered perhaps, both as an artist and a teacher, what your advice would be to those really young, right at the beginning, they're proper emerging artists, of like, how do you, if they're asking me, what answer should I be giving, do you think, in how do they embrace it, do they try and tame it, do they actively rebel against it, do they, what's your advice to a 12-year-old that goes, I can't draw well, so I'm going to use AI to draw, and then almost kind of doesn't develop their drawing practice because they've then become a kind of much more digital focus. Because it feels like a lot of young artists I'm working with, they're going in that direction.
Well, that's really depressing, isn't it?
I mean, I personally think so, yes, but
I mean, I think that why draw? Why learn how to draw? It's not a competitive sport. It's a way of attuning your body to the knowledge of other things, like acting or dancing. Drawing is a kind of embodied form of mimicry, which is fundamental to humans, what humans are as a species, which is very good at emulating other things, and through emulation absorbing an understanding of them and then playing with that. I mean, I would much rather they were pretending to be windmills with their arms than spawn an AI, you know, or kind of making a mess, or I just think that's incredibly depressing. It's slightly less depressing when a child feels intimidated by another child being able to draw better than them. But to feel crushed by what is effectively a probabilistic engine is terrible, isn't it? So we need to create the space in our curricula for non-competitive exploration. Because that's what, I mean, education is not about being the best at something, it's about improving your own faculties, isn't it?
Okay,
Can
thank you. No, you can't. Sorry. What I'm going to say is that
I would just say, look at art history. There are loads of people that can't technically do hyper-realistic drawings, but they make great works.
Yeah.
It's so moving, so moving. Like, I'm far more impressed by people that can move me with what they've created, and it's not hyper-realistic. It doesn't need to be a sort of carbon copy of what you're seeing to make it good.
okay, thank you.
Okay.